Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from PettyRevenge. Story 1 is by Stephen and Linda Stotch. Oops, forgot to tell my neighbor about our new fence. This is a very short story, but I always love ones like this, so I had to share this one. We moved to a new city 3 years ago, and we specifically told our realtor we would not buy a property that was subject to an HOA. She came through. No HOA. Apparently, someone forgot to tell our neighbor. Either that or our realtor didn't notice our house is a 2-member HOA controlled by our neighbor. She called the city because we got a dog. She called the city because we were in our backyard at night. She called me because I gave her kids s'mores. She lost it on my kid, then called my daughter a liar when she was like, "I don't need this, I have math homework." She also told us the property line is about 3 feet closer to our house than it actually is. I'm sorry, what? We had a boundary survey done before getting a privacy fence. I forgot to tell her, and the contractors are out there now loudly installing the posts. Oh, and I think their sprinklers are in our yard. Bummer. Edit. There isn't actually a 2-property HOA. We say that as a joke because she's constantly trying to tell us what to do. When we first moved here, we thought she was being helpful because this is our first experience with the suburbs and we had moved to a new state. We realized pretty quickly that she just likes telling people what to do. Down in the comments by Beneficial Nimitz 68. You should also get a copy of the survey for when she goes down there and tries to take down your fence and she has to replace it. Just saying. Lol, sprinklers, ha 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 ha. Underneath that by the OP, Stephen and Linda Stotch. I have the original, which I got from the city and the boundary survey we had done recently. We also have an abstract, which is not very exciting since we're the second owners of our house because we're big nerds. And finally underneath that by Beneficial Nimitz 68 again. Have a copy laminated and hang from your side of the fence. If she comes down to complain, just say, "Hang on one sec," and bring it out to show her. See here? This is my line. This here, now follow me, is your line. Do you need me to draw a better picture for you? Oh, I am going to remove that sprinkler from my lawn, by the way. PettyRevenge is the best. It always leaves me grinning by the end of the stories. Our next story is by someone whose name I'm probably going to pronounce incorrectly. It says Topiarist? Top IARIST. I think it's got to be a word and I just don't know this one. This story is by Public Topiarist. City wants to remove our residential-only parking and ticket us. As the title states, my childhood home's on-street private residential parking was taken away one day without notice due to what should have been an obvious error. My parents had purchased a home in a growing downtown 20-plus years earlier, and the property was taxed on and included 3 on-street parking spaces. These were spaces the city had agreed when they permitted 3 churches and a ton of small businesses around our home, making parking near our residence extremely limited. Our parking was on the side of our home on a cut-through street. The sidewalk had a double yellow curb, painted by the city, to denote those spots were private, shouldn't be used, and also had private residence parking signs. Well, the city one day takes out the 20-plus-year-old private residence parking signs and says no parking at all due to the yellow line. The local sheriffs start ticketing my parents, so my dad goes down to the courthouse and explains the situation and asks them to rectify the issue. The courthouse lady refuses to acknowledge any of the facts and says he can wait for his day in court if he wants to argue. My dad then thought up a great idea. The city had never properly lined the main street for no street parking, which made parking on it entirely legal. So the next day, my dad went out and bought the cheapest driving beater he could and parked it directly on the 2-way main street, directly in front of our home, and left it there. Cue the cops showing up quickly and calling a tow company that looked at it and said they wouldn't touch it because it's technically legal. We got a knock on the door and it's the sheriff. He starts begging my dad to move it. My dad says it's legal. He's not moving it as the current situation has left him with no other parking choices and he doesn't want another ticket. He explains the entire situation to him and tells the sheriff he can talk to the lady downtown at the courthouse as she will not listen to him, or common sense. The sheriff calls the lady and lets her know what a stupid effing situation she's created and tells her to fix it now. Cue him putting her on, and the courthouse lady says, "You have your spots and signs back," and the sheriff took care of the tickets. I guess somebody messed up somewhere along the lines there. Down in the comments by Commercial Exotic 2038. We were in a very rural area. The state transportation department put a culvert in an area of property we didn't use, but after the pipe was placed, couldn't use at all. We had the property reappraised and received a big cut in taxes, since their actions prevented full use of the property purchased. I would have the property reassessed, but you were made whole. And down at the bottom for clarification by Snarf Mute. So the main street was 2-lane with no spaces for parking, yet not marked as no parking? OP replied and said, "Yeah, I didn't think it was entirely legal and the tow guy was just not risking the tow, but the sheriff wasn't mad at my dad once he explained the situation. Just pleaded with my dad to move it to our old spots and he'd get it resolved, and did. Honestly was a nice guy and said he was pissed at all the time wasted and work this lady had caused him and other officers because she wouldn't be reasonable." Our next story is by Red Devil's House. Bring back dad fights. My 7-year-old son is having issues with bullying at school. Despite my best efforts to instill a hard edge around my kid, he is very soft, gentle, and loving and wouldn't hurt a fly. He's also slightly developmentally delayed and has speech issues. And these issues, while not crippling or super noticeable, are enough to cause him to be the source of teasing and harsh group bullying by his peers. Now the crux of my story. I was waiting in the school quad for the end of the day bell to ring. I overheard a school mom and a school dad discussing their kids' friends groups. My son's name was mentioned and criticism from the school dad regarding that kid, John, let's call my son, is a little special in the head, and James, let's call the other kid, is always swapping his crap food for John's good food. I'm not fussed, as kids are kids. So I listened more intently after this, as James had been a source of my kids' bullying, hitting, kicking, spitting quite a bit, and the school had done nothing. At this point, the school bell rang, and James's dad then proceeded to say, "Thank God I'm not John's parents, 'cause that kid is a downright P-word, and wouldn't surprise me if he turns out queer." I went red with rage and then took my son with me to approach James and his dad. I angrily said, "I assume you meant this, John?" The dad then said, "Yeah, mate, queer must run in the family. Poor B-word." I yelled expletives at him, told him he's a crap parent and he needs to step up and make a better example for his son. The dad tried to punch me and clipped me on the jaw, which was only a knock as I dodged it. Then countered with a fist full on the front of the face. He dropped quicker than a ton of bricks and I heard something crack, possibly his nose. Gathered up my son, told James to stay the heck away from John, and told his dad to man up or else he gets more. No, this isn't petty, but no one gives my son that treatment. That was a year ago. John has just turned 8 and no one has messed with him since. Bring back dad fights. Edit. I figured a PS is required to elaborate. In the years since this event, I've put my son into karate classes for self-defense purposes. He loves it and the self-discipline and attention required has him thriving. The bully kid is ironically now friends with my son, and the dad is quite respectful and polite towards me and my son now. It's really nice when a kid gets turned around, but it does not happen that often, so you're quite lucky that the kid is now nice and the dad is now nice. His overuse of some of these nasty words he used to describe your son at the beginning indicates that he was not a good person. Hopefully he's kind of calmed that down too. Down in the comments by Tolero23, I'm probably going to end up this way as well if my son is bullied. He is the sweetest kid ever, and we have to remind him that if someone hit him, he must tell them no and let a teacher know. This works in daycare, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to work in elementary school. My fave PettyRevenge story here is when a kid was getting bullied and then the mom hired older kids to beat the crap out of the bully. That sounds like a great story, but it's also not a good thing to do. But as you guys know, schools don't always handle bully situations, and sometimes you gotta take matters into your own hands, in a way, right? Underneath that by Squidge Squadge. My mother somehow found out where my bully lived, physically opposite the school gates, and went over to speak to their parents unannounced. My mother is an incredibly polite and can be a sensitive soul, But dear God, does she have a death stare and will stand up to any injustice in the world. Think, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. Turned to the max against her enemies, killing them with kindness. I genuinely thought my mom was getting beat up as I was waiting in the car. Got a sincere apology from the dad. A pathetic, snotty, and tearful fake apology from the daughter who got a clip around the ear to do a proper one. I'm sorry, wah. She never messed with me again. I had other bullies who were just as mean and were in trouble regardless anyway, but this girl got really nasty to the point she physically hurt me and was trying to corner me, not in public. There's honestly not much to say about bullies. The fact that they wake up in the morning and all they can think about is their opportunity to go after somebody in school. It's just despicable, and I wish there was some way you could just flip a switch and these people wouldn't be that way. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have an ideal day.